Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from wherever you're calling in. Thank you for joining us today, and welcome. Welcome to this Arctic Passion Online Seminar and Dialogue. So today we are meeting here for a topic very close to our Arctic Passion heart. And this online seminar and dialogue is dedicated to the Arctic community event databases developed in the EU project Arctic Passion together with the Snowchange Cooperative. And before we introduce our distinguished speakers and the framework for this whole webinar, we would like to hear more about you. We would like to know who's in the room today. We invite you to write us in the chat, your name, your background, and why you are here with us. And so here's our example. So when I say we, I mean Lisa Großwald and myself, who are working for the Association of Polar Early Scientists and are based at the Big Institute for Polar and Marine Research working in the Arctic Passion project. Okay, so let's have a look at our small survey. Not everyone has answered it yet, but most of you. So right now it's more than 60% early curious, 50% senior care professionals, and 20% are somehow in between. And most of you, about half of you are natural scientists in their background. We have 30% in the social science, 8% in policy, and another 8% in NGOs. And most of you, actually 75%, so 3/4, are working in the Arctic, have their working area in the Arctic, and 70% are living in the Arctic or are from the Arctic. Thank you so much. That's really nice to have this overview. I'm gonna close the survey so you can see the results yourself. Okay, a few housekeeping notes before we actually get started. We'd love to see you and warmly invite you to switch on your cameras, but also we are recording this webinar since you have many friends overseas in many time zones and want to make this available to all of you. So please also be aware of the recording. It will be available on the Arctic Passion and Apex websites. So we're welcoming any questions you may have and invite you to use the chat, especially in the second half of the webinar. We also want to get you involved actively, so please raise your hand and we can let you speak up. Otherwise, please mute yourself when you're not speaking. Okay, and with this, there's maybe a few words about your host of today, so Lisa and myself. We are part of APEX, which is the Association of Polar Early Scientists. So what is APEX? It's a network of 4,500 people interested in the polar and alpine regions from all kinds of backgrounds, disciplines, and cultural backgrounds. And it's a network from early curious scientists for early curious scientists, so platform for exchange on various topics, maybe knowledge transfer, alternative career paths, or just celebrating the polar and alpine research and regions. So education and training is a very integral part for us, and so we are involved in many new projects, and Arctic Passion is one of them.
So APEX is part in the Arctic Passion Consortium, and in this project we are organizing this online seminar and dialogue series, and we use this as a tool to engage with a diverse audience, to discuss our results, to share our ideas and plans, and just engage with an external audience coming from different backgrounds, career stages, and just different groups. So what is Arctic Passion in general? The Arctic Passion project is working on improving the network of environmental Arctic observing systems. And to achieve this, we are working together with local and indigenous communities, with different scientific networks and also decision makers. And we want to improve the current systems and develop new services. This all is aiming to meet the needs of the people in the Arctic, and with this also the larger society. Today we are presenting one of these new services, and this is a service that is a platform gathering different knowledge, histories, and data information about climatic, ecological, social, cultural changes in the Arctic. And that was developed by Snowchange. And with this, I also want to welcome our speakers, Tero Mustonen and Johanna Rotto, and who were co-creating this event databases. I'm gonna close the presentation for now, so we can see each other a little better. Tero and Johanna, they're working for the Snowchange Cooperative. Both have a background in human geography. And maybe just a few words about Snowchange. It's a network of local and indigenous communities in the Arctic, but also around in other parts of the world. They are working, for example, with local communities or indigenous communities to co-manage environmental restoration sites and bring together indigenous local knowledge and also scientific knowledge. So working scientifically, but also working towards the preservation of values, of cultures and knowledge of respective communities. And before I will hand over to you two, I would like to pass on the word to the Arctic Passion Project Coordinator, Michael Kacha, who will say a few words about the role of Snowchange in the project and also the integration of Indigenous peoples and local communities in the project. So over to you, Michael.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Lisa, and also Josephine. A warm welcome from my side as well. I'm extremely happy that this webinar is going to take place now, highlighting the finalization of the event database. And I would just like to express my gratitude to the indigenous communities and local communities which have been providing the trust into us as a project to work with us and co-create this event database. All of this is making us very proud and happy. And I should also express my gratitude towards Snowchange, Tero and Johanna. Without you, this would never have been possible because you are the ones who had the trust of the communities in the first place to work with us or with you and then contribute to Arctic Passion. So thank you, Snowchange. Thank you, communities. I hope this is just the start of some collaboration which would be possible to carry on in the future, in future projects or on other occasions. And now I'm curious to hear what Tero and Johanna are going to present about this event database. Thank you very much again.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. I am also curious, so I would like to pass on to Tero and then Johanna. And afterwards, we'll meet again and you have the opportunity to ask questions and we'll open up the floor. But first, now about the event databases. Thank you already.
Great to see everybody, and Lisa and Josephine and Michael. Thank you for your warm words. My name is Tero Mustonen. I'm a Finnish researcher at the Snowchange Cooperative. Our small organization has been going on for 24 years, and we are based here in Eastern Finland. But the Snowchange is essentially two things. We are a distinct organization registered in Finland devoted to these topics, but the Snowchange also is a community network, and we have been working both with Arctic Council and Sami Council, Inuit Circumpolar Council, and many other councils around the north for a long time. Today, we have very concise and short overview about the work that has been released actually originally in June, but the since the orders were from the high command that we will have a webinar, So jokes aside, it's of course wonderful to present this work. Johanna, my co-author and one of the researchers in Snowchange, will then, on the second part of this introduction, discuss Greenland and Faroe Islands, so North Atlantic ecoregion where this work has taken place. I'll start with two examples I'll start how to get to the databases, and then I'll reflect on some of the contents and choices that have been made. Before I go further, I'd like to acknowledge that we have here on the webinar one of the co-creators, Professor Leslie McCartney, who worked with the Gwich'in Department of Culture and Heritage over the past 4 years to accomplish this part of the databases, and what an outstanding example it is. So thank you to Gwich'in elders and all the massive amount of knowledge that Leslie was able to curate for the database. I'm sure today, if you look at the news cycle, there's no other topic in your minds except the event databases. So it's a great day to discuss Arctic knowledge. Before I go into a very quick 5-6 slide PowerPoint on some of the examples, I'd like to highlight that why did we start this work and how did it relate to earlier engagement with indigenous knowledge and science nexus. As said, myself and many of my colleagues here at the Snowchange have been working with a range of Arctic Council assessments and other research initiatives around the Arctic and for example, with the Sami for over 25 years. And repeatedly, there is a kind of a process where governments and shall we say, those parties that initiate funding or provide funding for research, they task different teams to co-create or work with indigenous peoples. Secondly, over and over again, we find out that it almost always starts from afresh or from the start. And this is, of course, very frustrating to many participants and partners that are from indigenous communities, because they will face over and over again many types of similar questions or activities that are designed and positioned, or the frameworks have been created by somebody else. And it was specifically to this topic and this issue that these event databases were planned to start, or the work that led to these databases started 4 years ago, 3.5 years ago, with the notion that we had originally 9 partners around the Arctic, essentially in the Arctic Passion Project, we were able to then invite and provide the freedom for all of these community teams to express what they would like to share. And one of the key emphasis was on this notion of events. Much has been said in academia about the indigenous temporal and spatial scales and knowledge. I'm not going to repeat them here. We don't have the time for that. Happy to discuss it on the Q&A session. But just to highlight the point that then when we try to find that bridge or a nexus or a meeting point between scientific inquiry and indigenous knowledge, how do we then work with materials that are from the culture, authored by the people, consented by the cultural protocols and mechanisms, like the recently approved Sami research protocols in Finland? And I'm happy to announce that 6 of our databases, they will be 8 hopefully by early 2025. We still have 2 under indigenous review, the Taltan and Unalakleet files. but most of them are now released and they are out there and available. And that's also much like a scientific inquiry to any topic, providing quality, safety, and curation of materials that are done by the people who are there and can guide us best how and what to share. So that's a very quick note on method or ways of how we were trying to create something of a reformist approach to sharing Indigenous and, in the case of Faroe Islands, local knowledge. But without further ado, time goes by fast. I'll be very concise. I'll share my little presentation. So let's go straight into it. I hope people can see it. And Lisa, yes, you can shout out if there is any, or Josephine, if there are technical problems. First of all, this is how it looks like when you go to arcticseas.org. So that's the central node for how you actually find out where these databases are available. And when you go there, on the left-hand side, there's a red button. There are many other communities listed and portrayed at the arcticseas.org, but so that's why we wanted to put it to a central node where if you browse that without any intent of visiting these databases, you'll be able to virtually visit every single indigenous coastal marine community in the Arctic waters and some local communities as well. But specifically for the event databases and Arctic Passion work, you click on this red button and then the map view will give you the existing available databases. Like this view currently shows Eurasian North and Greenland, but there are, rest assured, also the Quitchen and other materials online in North America. So arcticseas.org, then you click here on the left and go into the actual map view where you can just go directly to the databases. Now, in my few minutes before I hand over to Johanna, I'll give you an example of two of the databases and how they look like and how to navigate them. And then at the Q&A, please feel free to ask any questions. This is how the Sami database looks like. The Skolt Sami are one of the Sami groups, indigenous peoples living in Finland. They are living in northeastern part of Sápmi, Sami homeland, and they are on the Njautam River watershed or Näätämö River watershed. Essentially, what's going on in this choice that the Sami decided in that village when they started to participate, or community when they started to participate with the event database, was that they wanted to have 6 big topics on the go. First of all, it was of course always necessary to curate who are the Sami, who are the Skolt Sami specifically. They are quite distinct Eastern Sami group, so you'll find positions on introduction and photos from the old society and also contemporary era. And so these are one of the ways the Sami and the team wanted to make this also visually appealing so that people will actually see how life is on the land, what's going on, and how things evolve over time. This database, however, stands out, and that's one of the reasons why I highlight this rather shortly here, on the sense that the Sami, in this case, as one of the 8 event database communities, instead of providing a long historic view or narrative on how their knowledge observes changes, focused on a very contemporary issue. And the teams wanted to find out and study and continue the study of microplastics, a very topical question in that part of Sami area. And that's why you'll find out a film that has been made by the Sami about the research process and how knowledge indigenous knowledge and science worked hand in hand to find out a very relevant contemporary observation of both marine and freshwater aquatic change. There was also a cultural component, so there's a database on how different kinds of trees and use of trees culturally are linked with the Skolt Sami culture. So those are elements of how the Sami were sharing. This picture here on the right is an example of Scots pine, for example, and how housing and other structures are linked with the life on the land and so on. In this database, we also have water quality reports and data and some information on advancing how governance could be reformed and how does indigenous rights advance science and restoration. And then when we look at the 4 years of work, one of the splendid outcomes of this database work was the peer-reviewed science paper. So I'm just talking here a little bit on the process in that after this self-reflection that every indigenous community had capacity to do, at the start of the work, and when the Sami decided to focus on aquatic ecosystems, salmon, microplastics, at the end of that cycle, in addition to the database, we got a peer-reviewed science paper where the Sami team is equally authors together with the science team. And while in North America this has become more common nowadays, it's still not the case always in European North. And that's why the positive results from this way of doing things and getting the events, in this case microplastics observations, also registered in the world of science and natural sciences was a very positive process. So that's an example of how the Sami over the past 4 years wanted to collaborate in the Arctic Passion and with us on this work. Let me now spend just a few minutes or 2 minutes roughly before Johanna takes over on the other example from these databases. And I also welcome Leslie, Professor McCartney to reflect on this if there's time on the Q&A. Another kind of example of databases that were released comes from North American Arctic, from Northwest Territories in Canada, and from the Quitchen home area, where we worked with the Quitchen Social and Cultural Institute, Department of Culture and Heritage. And of course, all of the people on the call probably know quite well that the situation in North American Arctic and in European North is worlds apart on how research protocols have been implemented or structural elements are in place. So when we were having those early conversations with the Quitchen and Professor McCartney, they face also a question of having dozens of research initiatives, PhD students or other North American research processes coming to their small villages and asking about climate change, permafrost melt events, species on the move, and whatever the case. And in this particular section or part of the work, the Quitchen decided to share an outstanding example of huge volume of elders and Quitchen people's knowledge that had already been documented by a previous round of oral history work and associated cultural work. And that's why in this database you will find, in addition to the introduction and some of the welcome from the Grand Chief, thematic areas, for example, on fires in the tundra, permafrost melt, observations about animal changes and ecosystem change, reflections on climate events and so on, that have been curated by themes. And then at point 7, you'll find the full 190-page database going back over 150 years and beyond. So one of the, in my mind, the most important quality issues for the whole Gwich'en work, and I would argue that the Hanti database is much like that, is also the temporal scale. Now, going back to what I said earlier, there are differences in how indigenous peoples may narrate temporal or spatial significance and their cultural understandings of the world and biocultural landscapes. But for this database work, one of the compromises that we were asking every community to focus on was a timeline. So let's try to have a historic timeline, despite the fact that there might be other ways of understanding cycles and places and so on. And that's why you'll find in both in the visual materials and oral history snippets and curation elements from the actual people with their own words. For example, in this case, John Norbert, and talking about the permafrost changes and related to fish and how they were, or how he was seeing these things. And then a range of thematic summaries where, for example, the Mackenzie River, which is one of the large rivers in North America, has been observed to behave, and what are the things like flooding and things of that sort, events for the lack of better term. And finally, I'll end here. This is my last slide. We come to perhaps one of the most complex and what could be the word for 6th of November 2024. In many ways, mostly intriguing and complex ways of having these cultural dialogues and curating indigenous knowledge and scientific or Western understanding of these issues, which is about the pre-contact and myth time and those times when the Gwich'en, for example, in this case, had full cultural autonomy and governance of their own lands. But because this is a database on indigenous knowledge, we wanted to include as much as the communities wanted to share, and that's why you'll find oral histories and reflections and meaning and wisdom from the times that are beyond the recorded historical European time in that particular place of the for example, in early 1800s and so on and so on. These are two oral history snippets from how and what happened a long time ago. I won't read them through. You can all go to the database if you have interest in that, but just to make sure that it takes a lot of time and careful consideration on all sides how you work with this, and ultimately it is about meaning and how can we enable these cross-cultural communications as we want to advance these points. So that's kind of a very quick example of two, a Eurasian North example or European North and then North American case. And now to conclude this introduction, I'll hand over to Johanna, and she will share about the Greenlandic and Faroe Islands in a concise form. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Tero. It's always nice to jump into the discussions and how to really work with these issues. And that's really one of the starting points of this event databases with the communities that we have been working with. Really the question of what communities want to share with us, what is important to them, and what do they want to communicate. And that's really like one of the issues that I really hope that after this webinar, all of you have got a lot of curiosity to check all of these stories, database materials in the arcticseas.org. And we didn't have time to go through all of these in details, and because of the change, different time zones, challenges, what languages people speak, getting possible to just have this discussion in the middle of the day for some of us, or in the middle of the night in other persons, we had to put and organize this in this way. But if saying a couple of words about the Greenlandic event database. Here, the starting point have been quite a lot different compared to the Quechin or the Sami case. Here, this is more like a combination of the story that introduced the communities of Aasiat and Attu. What is history there, how they have living in their region, in the cultural context, how to put material together, but also long cooperation with some hunters and fishermen in the region. And here I would like to actually give credit to this person who unfortunately couldn't participate today, but Nunuk is one of those persons whose voice is very visible in this story map. He had been working many years in a project called Pisuna, where we have really in detail documented together with some other hunters and fishermen in his village and in some other villages in Greenland, what they have observed in their living environment. As being a hunter and fisherman in his home village, he have really seen the differences, what have been happening in his living conditions, what have been the environmental changes, but also the cultural changes that have been happening in his home village during these villages, what have been the preconditions, what have been the possibilities to hunt and fish, and not only set from the political point of view or how much he have been able to catch, but also what is happening in the nature, in the weather, how things are really going on. So that has been really like the starting point for the definition, what type of data do we want to show from Greenland? And there, the question has been quite a lot, how to put everything together. There have not been a lack of material. We have a lot of material. It has been material that could be put nicely in the data sheet that it's terrible just to have a glimpse in this type of webinar. It's not really the point of this webinar. Even many people who are keen to work with the data and statistics, but even with more socioeconomic data are hopefully very interesting to know. But the main points have been how to really get more into deep in this knowledge that these people have had about their everyday life and how it has been changing, and how they have also, based on their observations, been able to give some recommendations how the future might look like and how they could better take care of their resources on the place. And that's really like how we have been combining the material in the database together with Nunuk, his colleagues, but we have been also been communicating with the local school in Aasiat, also including the point of views what children have had about their conditions in the area and how they have learned to work more with their environment and getting better knowledge about how to take care of the living resources and all of this. So it has been really like a lot of work, what they have been putting together, giving for us, and then we have just been the more or less the people doing and putting everything together, trying to make it more readable. But we hope that we have found and managed to put this together in a nice way. We have at least they talked so. They were telling so for us, but it's always very challenging when you are combining this type of knowledge of people who are deeply living together with the nature to how we are able to show their knowledge about the environmental change. So this is really something what I would recommend you to check to get a better understanding what is happening in Greenland and how they have documented this and how well their observations during the last 15 years can support the scientific results that are coming maybe a bit after, because we are so dependent on official statistics, the peer-reviewed articles, and we all know that it takes time. But Nunuk and his colleagues have really been able to show what is happening in the areas now, and what is very nice in that perspective. And that would be really like the main challenges when we have been working with Arctic Passion, that we have had these different communities. Partly what is happening in the region at the moment, partly how has the development been during the last couple of 100 years, and how to combine the people, indigenous peoples, local communities, how to share their information. The other point and region that I wanted to talk with you was about the Faroe Islands. At the beginning of the Arctic Passion, we were not thinking about working with Faroe Islands at all. We were very much focusing on how to develop the event databases from the 3 settlements in Russia. But as the world is how it is today, we had to make a change, and that was a very good possibility from the Faroese point of view to include Hey as one of our event database partners. And for the Faroe Islands event database, the starting point was, and now I would like to have maybe 30 people behind me to tell this story. All the work what the Snowchange started with the Faroe Islands, with the local fishermen, other people's participating, taking care of the natural resources there, hunting, pilot whaling, bird harvesting, fishing, making their own notes about the environmental change. All the work started over 20 years ago. And this is more or less more like a documentation of development of these different activities. How the people were telling for us, how are we doing with pilot whaling, how we are doing with bird harvest, what we have learned about the nature when we have been working with these activities, and how then this event database put everything together, how people saw these activities 20 years ago and the development, what are the conditions for pilot whaling, bird harvest, and also in some sense also in fishing in changing environment, when all the changes have become, and we have been thinking how to put everything together. So this is more or less one of the examples what we have been creating in so-called story maps, where people are able to check the different databases based on the themes that our communities have been chosen, and then we recommend you all get more information about the different activities. In the case of Faroe Islands, there is more or less like the information based on how, for example, pilot whaling is working, how the traditions, the local catches have been taking place. But in all of these topics, there is a link for the database itself that is more focusing on what are the concrete observations and how the people's knowledge is included to the Arctic Passion's story maps in the Arctic seas, that we are hoping that is living further and is giving you good examples about how the local communities wanted to share their knowledge, and how different type of information can be put together in one huge web database, but still showing the differences, highlighting what are the local preconditions and what are the topics important for them to communicate with them. But I think I will stop here and we can go further.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tero and Johanna, for your work, and also thank you so much to all your collaborating communities. I think it's just really, immense resource, valuable resource for a wide group of people who can use this. And I'm sure there's really much behind all the work that is just visible on the platform, like long-term relationships and valuable conversations. And it's just a really helpful platform for now people could use. And maybe as a connecting question and to also start the last quarter of this webinar where people can ask questions about the event databases. I'd like to ask you to say a few words about the main target audiences for the event databases, and in what ways the event databases can be used from your perspective.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's a good question in a world of overflowing with content. That's why we about 4 years ago, or when this work was initiated, we were trying to task every community or group or the unit to think that create that kind of a outcome that you would like to use. So I think one of those short answers is that we'd like this to be for the people. And also sometimes it will be helpful that people see their own cultural and historic frameworks curated in this manner. The second audience, so to speak, is of course in some ways a specialized group. So we know that there are scientists and there are researchers who, as I said in my introduction, they are looking for ways of looking at indigenous knowledge that's safe, that's appropriate, that's done well, that's curated by the people, and is available. Because in this business, you have constantly arguments that people should use indigenous knowledge more, and then you have to know a lot of things and people and so on to do it in a good way. So hopefully the databases will be serving also external or outside needs, such as researchers or for example, management organizations and stuff like that. This would come to mind, for example, from Greenland, where the local people have been observing, and they will create a view on how do you manage seabirds and what are the gaps between how Nuuk decides and what the local context might be. Lastly, I would say that, of course, it would be wonderful to think that these are meaningful somehow to a wider audience, but we are very realistic in that sense that every one of those databases has a short video, and those videos are for the TikTok world, the youth and the school and young students who don't have the time, or they live in another social context than us older folks, and that's why every single database has some form of a self-produced or co-produced film or a clip that will summarize some of the key findings, and even the one from Asia, I think Greenland, has been produced by the school themselves. So those are ways of not only speaking to what audiences are these for, but how do you then disseminate this into a kind of a sectoral sharing. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so you're very welcome to just raise your hands if you have questions or post them in the chat. Thinking about our audience here, we have like about 60% of early career professionals with the working area in the Arctic. And maybe from your experience, long-term experience, what would be your main points if you if you're talking to early career professionals who would like to integrate more indigenous and local knowledge to their research being done in the Arctic, what would be your starting point? What would you recommend them how to engage?
Yeah, maybe I can start and Johanna can continue. Well, it's some ways unfair to early career scientists because we have now made great steps and we are seemingly more progressive, for example, in the European Union on inclusion and I wouldn't use the word integration because we have to keep these separate ways of knowing, but there's a kind of a shall we say context for including and working with indigenous peoples, and a lot of the youth have much better understanding of the colonial histories and land grabbing and all kind of things that have taken place and now may take place again, perhaps after yesterday, but nevertheless, so there's a lot of goodwill. At the same time, the Arctic is kind of divided into two parts. You have the North American land claim organizations and processes that have been there for, in some cases, 40 years to navigate research protocols, and there's even a research licensing in, for example, in the Northwest Territories and Nunavut and so on. And then in the European North, it's a bazaar, or it's kind of a free for all. So the Sami and the Greenlanders have much less resources and much less capabilities to navigate the ever-growing interest. And that's why, to summarize from my side, my advice to the early career scientists and the well-meaning people that have interest in these things is that in some ways it works the same way as good research. Know the best that you can on your topic. Be better in trying to answer a lot of your early questions yourself. And also, I have always tried to say that work with indigenous communities is something that you should think like working with your own family. That do you want to go to your grandmother and say, okay, I want to research your intimate life or choices or histories. So these are not targets of research, these communities. They are living people with their living needs. They are always busy. They have been seeing all of it, and they are welcoming you as a long history of research in these places. So be extremely mindful and truthful and know as much as you can of that topic that you want to research, and don't waste their time. Rather, focus on it and be truthful, and usually it might work out if you do field work there. But Johanna, maybe you have some better advice.
No, I would follow your recommendation. What I would maybe like to add to your comment is that, as you put it, there is a lot of long tradition and documentation how to work with indigenous communities in North America. But in the European North, it might be nice thinking about what have been happening in the latest years is that the Sami Parliament published the ethical guidelines to work with the Sami people just last year. So that document is a very good start if you haven't been working with indigenous before, especially in the European context. And similar guidelines are on the way to come also from Greenland, but that's ongoing work and they haven't put any deadline for their work because that's always a very sensitive work, how to work with these ethical issues when working with the indigenous communities.
Maybe if I may invite Leslie to reflect for a minute or just a statement on, so in the audience we have a world-class researcher on oral histories that enabled the QuickGen database to be what it is, and recently she also released a lot of these elders' voices on an award-winning book. So maybe, Leslie, you have been doing this work with the oral history and indigenous knowledge for decades as well. How would you summarize and advise to a young person who is starting this if you care to say a few words or think about it.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. My advice to students that come to me and want to do this type of work, whether it's in the North and the Yukon or the Northwest Territories and Alaska, is you are embarking on building relationships that will be there for your lifetime and their lifetime. This is a lifetime of work. This is not something where you fly in, get your data, fly out, give a poster back to the community. That you are building relationships with people and community, and you need to respect that this could be and probably will be lifelong work. And so you must go into it with that type of mental commitment. That's certainly been my experience and other people that I've seen. And that truly is building relationships with people and yes, committing yourself for your life for this type of work.
So perhaps the anecdote with your own grandmother wasn't too far off, in the sense that, without of course saying anything about anybody's grandmothers, but it's an example of how significant and long-term and meaningful these often become if you are serious, and if you're not serious, don't do it. So that's kind of a great, thank you, Leslie. And we have a one question in the chat. So where do people in their home area start to look at the knowledge and stories? Well, of course, it's topical to say that welcome to the databases, so that's why they are there. Again, when we started this Arctic Passion collaboration, the idea was that the larger framework for the project is that it's filled with natural scientists and many other processes that study the Arctic and try to advance observations of how the North is changing. But one voice that's mostly missing from a lot of these things is the authentic authored view from a place. Instead, we get huge amount of interpretations and on and on and on. And that's why hopefully when you do your work, Matilde, and find out, I would always try to encourage people to look to the source. Go to the available indigenous, for example, Sami or Greenlandic poetry, literature, statements that are there. And on YouTube, you'll find a wealth of community videos and voices, Sami authors. There's a tremendously important Sami author, Niels Aslak-Valkeapää, and his works. So I would start this kind of a thinking process from those authentic, real voices of the people, because after a while you start to get the kind of the clang and feeling for how they are talking about their precious home areas and so on. So, and we should always just remember that there's no access or availability of indigenous knowledge that's somehow universal. They own their knowledge. It's their right and privilege to safeguard it, and that's why only by working well with these people you are able to get any place.
Awesome, thank you all so much. Looking at the chat, but I'm also would like to ask one question. Maybe it's the final one we'll see. What was the first of all, what did you enjoy most when working on the databases? And also, can you also say a few words about the challenges? I'm thinking of the language. Is this a barrier or actually not? Maybe you want to refer to that?
Maybe Johanna can start.
What I was enjoying most was maybe the variety. Really like what topics became the most important one. What were the ones that people wanted to highlight? Because when you start to work with one case study area, you have always some things of, okay, it might be turn out like this or that, and maybe these are the topics that they want to tell about. But that was definitely not the case in all the event databases. So I was thinking that was really like the one when you give the voice for the local communities. What are important topics for you? It's really opening the perspective for you on the way that you were not expecting from the beginning, but make you feel so much better afterwards that you have given the voice for them and you have learned something by yourself also during the process.
Personally, on our side here, and I'll be very concise because of time, but there is no easy way to capture what happened in 2022 with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and it's this kind of decentralized impact on many Siberian communities, and on the other hand, the pain and also the burden of navigating these things became, in my mind, a success in that sense that we have the work that was able to take place on the first year available as the people decided to share it in this extremely complex time, and the Hanti database, for example, is an outstanding view on dozens of years, over 100 years of forest fires, ecosystem change in the River Ob area, and I that was the most hard part professionally to navigate the war, but we did what we could, and now at least those works are available safely, so that nobody's put into harm's way, and I hope that people who use the Russian databases appreciate that that's not a minor thing when we still got those voices out in time, and people's instructions on for better world and better Arctic to be shared. So they wanted this to be available despite the times.
All right, thank you so much. And maybe jumping on Tero's question in the chat, but also just a final question: what are you looking at when you look into the future for the databases?
Yeah, well, they will be available, and the exciting Christmas gift will be that we'll have 2 more databases for you available by hopefully latest early 2025 from Alaska and another Canadian Indigenous community. They are having the Indigenous review, so that's why only 6 or 7 of the materials are now available. But to conclude, we as an organization have been at it for 25 years now, and we also have a large ecosystem restoration work underway. So we'll be maintaining and updating these on this level and potentially adding here and there, but we are still uncertain on how this will continue, and we'll keep you posted. Thank you.
Awesome. We're looking forward. Well, thank you all so much for coming to the end of this online seminar and dialogue. Tero, Johanna, and all your colleagues and friends, congratulations to this compilation of wealth of knowledge. And thank you so much for sharing this with us today. It was a real pleasure, and always a pleasure to listen to you. So also, dear audience, thank you for your time and your great questions. So you hopefully soon again in one of our next Arctic Passion online seminars. The next one coming up is on the topic of reducing the risk to Arctic shipping, also an important topic, of course, which is taking place on 4th of December. Keep your eyes open for the announcement. Once again, thank you for joining us today, and have a good rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you all.